Leo stepped onto the planet's surface with a sense of awe. He had been on many missions before, but nothing like this. This was no ordinary planet. It was the heart of the Galactic Council, where peace talks between different alien races took place. Today, his mission was simple: represent humanity, build alliances, and ensure Earth's place in this vast intergalactic world. As he walked through the grand entrance of the council building, Leo couldn't help but stare at the towering structure before him. It was made from shimmering stone, glowing softly under the twin suns of the planet. The architecture was like nothing Leo had ever seen before, tall, sleek, and elegant. The hall inside was enormous, filled with high ceilings and walls lined with alien symbols and portraits of historical figures from across the galaxy. But what caught Leo's attention the most wasn't the building, it was the people. The council was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, speaking in their native languages, all negotiating and exchanging ideas. It was a sight to behold, but there was one person who stood out above all others. She was standing at the front of the room, speaking to a group of delegates, her presence commanding attention. Princess Alira, the leader of one of the most powerful alien factions in the galaxy, stood tall with an air of authority. Leo had heard stories about her. Princess Alira was known for her beauty and intelligence, as well as her strong leadership. She was a warrior princess, never afraid to fight for her people. She was also known for being cold, distant, and a little mysterious. Few had ever truly gotten close to her, and Leo knew it would take more than a simple handshake to gain her trust. As Leo made his way toward the group of human diplomats, he caught Alira's eye. For a split second, she paused mid-conversation, her gaze locking with his. Leo noticed the slight shift in her expression. Something changed, though he couldn't quite tell what it was. There was a brief moment of silence, like the air itself had become heavier. The princess didn't smile or wave, but she didn't look away either. Instead, she simply stared at him, her eyes wide with something he couldn't read. He felt a strange chill run down his spine, but he brushed it off. After all, he was just a human diplomat in a room full of powerful alien leaders. Surely, it was nothing. As the council meeting continued, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time he glanced at Alira, she seemed to be watching him. Her gaze was intense, but it wasn't hostile, at least not in a way he could recognize. It was as if she was waiting for something that only she knew. The meeting broke for a short break, and Leo found himself standing near a window, gazing out at the vast cityscape. He was lost in thought when he suddenly heard footsteps behind him, turned, and there she was, Princess Alira. "I was hoping to speak with you, human," she said, her voice smooth and firm. She didn't smile, but her tone was not unkind. "Are you not curious about the peace talks?" Leo cleared his throat, trying to mask his surprise. "I am, Your Highness." "Very much so." Alira's eyes narrowed slightly, and Leo could see that her gaze was still fixed on him, studying him. "And what is it that you think you know about this place? About our people?" Her voice had a sharp edge to it, as if she were testing him. Leo hesitated. He had heard about the struggles and tensions between the factions in the galaxy, but he wasn't sure what Alira wanted to hear. "I know that peace is fragile, and that every decision made here could affect millions of lives. I'm here to make sure that Earth's voice is heard." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a step closer, her eyes scanning him as if looking for something. "You are different," she said softly. "I can see it." Leo didn't know what to make of her words. He'd been told that the aliens would treat him as an outsider. Perhaps she was just sizing him up. But something about her gaze unsettled him. It was as if she knew something he didn't, something that had to do with him. Before he could ask what she meant, the council meeting resumed, and Alira turned away. "Perhaps we will speak again soon, human." With that, she walked back to the front of the room, her regal presence commanding attention once more. Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had just happened. He'd expected a cold reception from the princess, but this was something else. He'd never been so keenly aware of someone's attention, let alone a person as powerful as Alira, as the day went on. Leo found himself distracted, his thoughts constantly drifting back to the princess. Why had she stopped? When she saw him, why had she seemed so interested. He had never believed in the idea of fate or destiny, but the encounter left him with an uneasy feeling that he couldn't quite explain. That night, as Leo lay in his quarters, he tried to sleep, but his mind was racing. There was something about Illyra's reaction that bothered him, something that made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a mystery that he had yet to understand. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized he was determined to figure out what it was. Leo couldn't get Princess Illyra out of his head. Her gaze, so intense and filled with something unspoken, lingered in his mind long after the council meeting had ended. I'd tried to focus on his duties, but every time he looked across the room he found himself searching for her, hoping for another interaction. A chance to understand why she had reacted the way she did. The next few days were a blur of diplomatic meetings and strategy sessions. Leo was busy, but his thoughts always circled back to Illyra. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was always watching him, studying him in a way that made him feel both uneasy and curious at the same time. It wasn't until the third day that Leo had another chance to speak with her. The council meeting had adjourned for lunch, and Leo, trying to make the best of his situation, wandered around the palace's grand courtyard. The air was warm, and the sound of alien birds calling in the distance filled the silence around him. It was peaceful, but it didn't last long. As he walked through a small garden, he spotted Illyra sitting alone, looking out over the vast landscape. She was still as elegant as ever, her posture regal, her face serious. She was holding a small, strange-looking device in her hands, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. Leo hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure if he should approach her. She had been so distant before, and he didn't want to push his luck. But something about the way she sat there alone made him feel that this might be his only chance to understand her. Taking a deep breath, Leo stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said quietly. Illyra didn't startle. Instead, she turned her head slowly, her piercing eyes locking onto his. "Human," she greeted him, her voice calm but cold. "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you might be." "Lonely," Leo said, trying to keep his tone light. "It seems like you're always surrounded by people, but never really alone." Lyra's lips twitched into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Alone is not something I am allowed to be," she said softly. "As a princess, there is always someone watching, someone judging. It is the price of leadership." Leo nodded, unsure how to respond to that. He had no idea what it was like to live under such pressure. His life back on Earth had been simple. In comparison, no political games, no constant expectations to meet. But something about Illyra's words made him realize that she wasn't just a leader. She was a prisoner of her own position. "That sounds difficult," Leo said carefully. "I can't imagine what it must be like." Illyra's gaze softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "It is not your burden to bear, human," she said. "You are here for peace. Yes, that is all that matters. It is why you are here after all." Leo couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. "I'm not just here for peace," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I'm here to understand. To understand why you looked at me the way you did when we first met." Lyra's expression froze again, her eyes narrowing. For a brief moment, Leo thought she might lash out, but she remained calm. "That reaction was nothing," she said quickly. "You mustn't worry about it." "But I do," Leo insisted. "It wasn't just a glance. There was something more there, something I didn't understand." Lyra stood up abruptly, her movements swift and sharp. "You misunderstand," she said, her voice colder now. "It is not something you need to know. It is not for you to understand." Leo watched her for a moment, his curiosity burning. "But why? What does it have to do with me?" Illyra sighed, looking away. "You are too persistent, human," she said, her voice losing some of its earlier harshness. "If you must know, it is not you, but your bloodline." Leo's heart skipped a beat. "My bloodline?" he asked, confused. Illyra turned to face him fully now, her eyes fixed on his with a strange intensity. "Yes," she said. "Your ancestors were involved in a betrayal that hurt my family deeply. Your great-grandfather, or perhaps even further back, he played a part in something that has haunted my people for generations. It is why your face, it is so familiar to me." Leo felt a wave of shock wash over him. He had never heard any of this before. His family had always been proud of their history, but nothing about betrayal or conflict with another species was ever mentioned. His mind raced as he tried to process what Alira was telling him. "I had no idea," Leo said slowly. "I had no idea about any of this." Alira nodded. "You wouldn't. Your people have kept this history hidden, just as mine have. But when I saw you, I knew immediately. Your bloodline is tied to a past that my people can never forget." Leo's mind was spinning. How could he have not known about this? What had his ancestors done? And why had this information been kept from him? "I'm not my ancestors," Leo said, his voice firm. "I don't want to be judged for something I didn't do." Alira's expression softened slightly, but her eyes still held that deep sadness. "I know," she said quietly. "But in my world, bloodlines matter. Who you are is shaped by the past. And though I understand that you are not to blame, it does not change the history that exists between our peoples." Leo stood silently, feeling the weight of her words. He had never thought that something as distant as history could affect his present in such a profound way. But now, everything seemed different. His mission, his purpose, it wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about understanding a deeper, darker connection that had been hidden from him for so long. Leo sat alone in his quarters that night, the weight of Alira's words heavy on his mind. His family's past, a past he had never known, was now at the center of everything. He had come here to represent Earth, to build alliances and to negotiate peace, but instead, he was caught in a tangled web of history, betrayal, and family secrets. He tried to sleep, but the more he thought about Alira's revelation, the more questions arose. What had his ancestors done to harm her people? And why had none of his family ever spoken about it? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Leo stood up quickly, surprised to have a visitor at this hour. He opened the door, to find a young alien servant standing in the doorway. "Human Leo. The princess requests your presence," the servant said in a soft voice. "Now?" Leo asked, his heart racing. He had barely gotten over their last conversation, and now Alira wanted to see him again. The servant nodded. "Yes, human. The princess is in the garden. She says it's urgent." Leo felt a mix of curiosity and unease. He had hoped for more time to process what Alira had said, but it seemed like the universe had other plans. "Thank you," Leo said, closing the door behind him and quickly making his way to the palace garden. The night air was cool. As he stepped outside, and the garden was bathed in soft moonlight, it was a peaceful place, with exotic flowers blooming under the stars. In the distance, he could see Alira standing by a small fountain, her back turned to him. She didn't notice him approach, and for a moment he simply watched her. She seemed lost in thought, her usual calm demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. "Alira?" Leo called out softly. She turned sharply at the sound of his voice, her eyes widening in surprise. "Human Leo, you came," she said, her voice softer than before. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to see me after," Leo replied, taking a few cautious steps forward. Alira looked away, her gaze falling to the ground. "I should not have burdened you with the past," she said, her voice low. "But there are things that must be said, things that you need to understand." Leo frowned, stepping closer. "I don't want to be judged for things I didn't do, but I want to understand. I need to know what happened, what my family did to your people." Alira sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her position had become too much to bear. "You must know, Leo," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The betrayal your ancestors caused. It's shattered everything for my people. My family was once respected, trusted by all. But because of one man, one human, our entire bloodline was dishonored. Your great-grandfather, he betrayed my father's family, sold secrets to our enemies, and because of that, countless lives were lost." Leo's heart sank as he listened. He had never imagined his family's past could be so dark, so damaging. His mind raced as he tried to piece together what Alira was telling him. "But why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Leo asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "Why did my family keep this a secret from me?" Illyra's eyes hardened slightly. Your family has done everything in its power to erase the past, to hide the truth. It is not just the betrayal that hurts. It is the lies, the cover-up. Your people believed that if they ignored what had happened, it would disappear, but it never did. It is still with us, in our blood, in our history. Leo swallowed hard. Struggling to find his voice, I had no idea. I never wanted to be part of this. I'm just here to help, to make peace, not to keep fighting. Lyra met his gaze, her eyes filled with something that could have been pity, or perhaps sadness. No. And that is why I wanted to speak with you, because you are not like the others. You are not your great-grandfather. But you carry the same name, the same blood. That is why when I saw you, I felt like I had to face it. The past is not easily forgotten. Leo's chest tightened at her words. He felt as if the weight of the galaxy had suddenly fallen on him. He had come here thinking he was just one man, just one diplomat among many. But now, he felt like a symbol of his family's past sins, a past he had no control over. Lyra seemed to sense his discomfort, and she took a step closer. I did not want to hurt you, Leo, but the truth cannot stay hidden. You need to know what your family did, so you can choose what kind of man you will be. Leo nodded slowly. I don't want to carry the sins of my ancestors, he said, his voice firm. But I also don't want to ignore them. I will face whatever comes, no matter what it is. Lyra studied him for a moment, her eyes softening. Perhaps there is hope for you yet, human. She paused, as if weighing something in her mind. But know this. Your people are not trusted here, not by my people. And there are many who still remember the betrayal. Leo clenched his fists, determination flooding his veins. I will do everything I can to change that. I'll prove that humans are not like that anymore. I'll prove that I am not like him. Lyra nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile forming on her lips. We shall see, Leo. We shall see. As she turned away, Leo watched her disappear into the shadows of the garden. He stood there for a moment, processing everything she had said. His mission had just become much more complicated. The path ahead was no longer just about negotiations. It was about redemption, understanding, and proving that his family's past didn't define who he was. And though the road would be difficult, Leo was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, for peace for his people, and most of all for himself. Leo woke up early the next morning, the events of the previous night still fresh in his mind. Lyra's words echoed in his head, and they had changed everything. The history between their people, the betrayal, the secret sit, was all too much to process. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of the alien palace, tasked with building a future of peace for humanity. But the past wasn't going to let him go that easily. He had barely had a moment to himself since arriving on the planet, but today felt different. He knew he needed to focus, to make sure that he represented Earth well. But there was something in the back of his mind that kept pulling him back to Lyra and her family's painful history. He needed answers, and the sooner he got them, the better. As Leo walked through the grand hallways of the palace, his thoughts swirled around what Lyra had told him. It was strange, feeling the weight of something that happened so long ago. The betrayal had occurred before he was even born, yet it had shaped everything about his interactions with the alien princess. Could he ever escape that shadow? His mind wandered back to their conversation in the garden. Lyra had said his great-grandfathers. Betrayal had shattered everything. What did that mean? What had the betrayal been? And how was Leo supposed to atone for something he hadn't even done? He was just one man, after all. But it wasn't just any man. He was tied to the past through blood. Through history, and through the name he carried, Leo didn't have time for more questions. The council meeting was starting soon. Pushed the thoughts to the back of his mind and focused on his responsibilities. It was his job to negotiate, to speak for humanity. If the mission failed, Earth's future and the galaxy could be in jeopardy. The Grand Council Hall was already bustling with activity. Representatives from dozens of alien species were gathered, some speaking in loud, unfamiliar languages, others in quiet conversation. Leo's job was simple: sit at the table, listen, and make sure Earth's voice was heard. Yet as he walked in, he could feel the eyes of the others on him. The room went silent for a brief moment when he entered. All eyes seemed to be drawn to him, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of their gazes. He took his seat, trying his best to appear calm. Even though inside his heart was pounding, he caught Alira's gaze from across the room. She was sitting at the head of the council table, her posture perfect, her eyes unwavering. As their gazes met, something shifted in the air between them. It was a silent exchange, one that neither could ignore. Alira's eyes softened for a moment before she looked away. Leo felt a strange sense of relief, but it didn't last long. The council meeting began, and the room was filled with the sound of arguments and debates in languages Leo barely understood. He wasn't there to engage in every conversation, but he had to be ready to speak when it was his turn. Hours passed in what felt like minutes, the constant flow of discussions wearing Leo down. But as the meeting continued, he began to realize something. The other delegates, the alien leaders, weren't treating him like a representative from Earth. No. They were treating him differently, like he was something else entirely. Something that was tied to the past, to the betrayal his ancestors had caused. Leo's suspicions grew when he saw Alira speak with a few of the delegates. Their conversation was brief, but the way they looked at Leo as they spoke said everything. He was the outsider, the one with the stain of his ancestors on his bloodline. They didn't trust him, and it was clear that no matter how much he tried to prove himself, he would always be judged by the actions of someone else. Frustration bubbled up inside him. He had come here to represent peace, to make Earth's voice heard, but instead, he was stuck in the middle of a history he didn't understand. A history that no one had ever told him about. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his mission wasn't just about peace. It was about earning trust. It was about proving that humanity had changed. They weren't the same as the ancestors who had caused so much pain. Leo knew that he couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. The question was, how? How could he show these aliens, these powerful beings, that Earth wasn't the same as it had been centuries ago, that humanity wasn't a threat? He didn't have the answers, but he knew he couldn't give up. The meeting finally came to a close, and Leo found himself once again standing in the hallway, lost in thought. He needed to clear his head, but there was no time. He had a duty to complete. As he walked through the corridors, he found himself heading back to the palace garden, the place where he had spoken with Alira before. When he arrived, Alira was already there, standing by the fountain again. This time, she wasn't looking out into the distance. She was looking directly at him. Her eyes were intense, as if waiting for something. "Leo," she said quietly. Her voice calm but filled with an emotion Leo couldn't quite place. "I've been thinking about what we said. About your family's past." Leo nodded, feeling his chest tighten. "I need to understand. I need to know what happened. I can't just keep pretending that nothing happened." Alira's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. "The past is not something we can ignore, but it is also not something we can live in forever," she said. Perhaps you will never fully understand what it feels like, but you must try. You must show that you are not your ancestors, that you are different." Leo looked at her, meeting her eyes. "I promise you, I will do everything I can to change their perception of us, of me." Alira's lips curved into a small smile, one that was both sad and hopeful. "Then perhaps there is hope for you after all, human." Leo stood there, feeling a sense of resolve settled in his chest. The path ahead was not going to be easy, but he would walk it. For peace. For his people, and for the future of the galaxy. Leo woke up with a new sense of purpose. The conversation he had had with Princess Alira the night before had left him with more than just questions. It had given him a goal. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was a symbol of the future. Chance to prove that humanity had changed and could be trusted. The past, with all its betrayals and secrets, could no longer define him or his people. He walked through the palace, determined to focus on the peace talks. He had come to represent Earth, to make alliances, and to ensure humanity's place in the galaxy. But now, he understood that his task was far more complicated than he had first thought. It wasn't just about words, it was about actions. His actions would speak louder than any speech he could give. The council had been in session for hours. Delegates argued and debated over everything from trade to security to territory. Leo listened intently, his eyes constantly shifting across the room, watching the reactions of the various alien leaders, but his attention kept drifting back to Alira. She sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her eyes sharp and calculating. Leo couldn't help but notice that she was often looking at him, her gaze lingering a little too long. At first, he had thought it was just his imagination, but now he was sure of it. Lyra was watching him. She was studying him, waiting for him. Something what exactly? He wasn't sure. But he wasn't about to let that distract him. He had a job to do. When the meeting broke for lunch, Leo found himself walking towards Alira, his heart pounding. He had promised himself that he would try to understand her better, try to get to the heart of the tension between their people. And if there was one thing he knew, it was that understanding came through conversation, not silence. Alira was standing by the large windows, looking out at the view of the city below. She didn't seem to notice Leo's approach, so he took a deep breath before speaking. "Princess Alira," he said, his voice steady. She turned to face him, and for a moment, Leo saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, curiosity. It was gone. In an instant, replaced by her usual calm and composed demeanor, "Human Leo," she greeted him. "I did not expect to see you here. What is it that you want?" Leo took a step closer, his eyes meeting hers. "I want to understand. I want to understand the past, your people, and why it's so difficult for us to trust each other. Here to make peace, but I need more than just words. I need to know what's really going on." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly as if she were weighing his words. She took a moment before answering. "The past is not something that can be erased," she said slowly. "It is not something we can forget. Your people betrayed us. It has shaped everything we do, everything we are. But you are not your ancestors. And yet, I cannot simply ignore the truth of what happened." Leo felt a pang of frustration. He had been expecting something like this, but hearing it again was still difficult. "I'm not asking you to ignore the past. Not responsible for it? I didn't do what they did." Alira looked at him, her expression softening for just a moment. "No, but your bloodline carries the weight of that betrayal, and it will always be a part of you. It is hard for my people to accept that your presence here means anything different than what came before." Leo clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. "But we're not the same. We've changed. Humanity has learned from its mistakes, and I'll prove it to you. To all of you." Alira studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she could believe him. Finally, she spoke. "Maybe you will. But the road ahead is not an easy one. Human. There are those who will never forgive your people, no matter what you do. But perhaps you can start by showing that you are different. And maybe, just maybe, the rest of us will follow your example." Leo nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He knew she wasn't speaking just for herself. She was speaking for her entire people. And that made him realize just how important this moment was. He wasn't just fighting for peace between two nations. He was fighting for the future of all humans, for the chance to prove that they could overcome their past mistakes. "I will do everything I can," Leo said, his voice steady. "I won't give up. I won't let the past hold us back." Lyra gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. "We shall see, human, we shall see." As she turned to walk away, Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of determination wash over him. He wasn't just fighting for his people, he was fighting for his future, for Alira's future, for the future of the galaxy. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Leo attended more meetings, made more promises, and worked tirelessly to show the other delegates that humanity was more than just a distant memory of past mistakes. He knew that he couldn't change their minds overnight, but he could show them that humanity was capable of greatness, and that was enough for now. As the day came to a close, Leo found himself back in his quarters, exhausted but hopeful. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges were great. But for the first time since he had arrived, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Maybe peace was possible. He looked out the window, his eyes tracing the lights of the distant city, and for the first time, he believed that humanity could carve out its place in this vast galaxy. He would fight for it. He would prove that Earth was worth trusting, and no matter how hard it got, Leo knew he would not stop until he had earned that trust. Leo woke up early the next morning, the weight of his mission heavier than ever. He had spent the night thinking about the conversation with Alira. The past, the betrayal, the deep scars that had been left between their people, it all felt so overwhelming. But he couldn't afford to let the past control his every move. He had a job to do, and he had promised Alira that he would show that humanity was different. Today would be a critical day. The council was set to discuss the next steps in the peace talks, and Leo knew this was his moment to prove that Earth's place in the galaxy could be more than just a painful memory. He couldn't do it alone, though. He needed Alira's help, her approval, and he wasn't sure if he would get it. As he walked to the council hall, Leo could feel the eyes of the other delegates on him. The whispers, the stares, they were impossible to ignore. It was clear that the history of his ancestors was never far from their minds. Leo didn't mind, though. If anything, it made him more determined to prove that he wasn't defined by the actions of those long gone. When he entered the council hall, he saw Alira at the head of the table. She sat straight, her face expressionless as always. But this time, Leo could sense something different in her. A slight change in her posture, the way she looked around the room. Her gaze briefly caught his, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room disappeared. She didn't say anything, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. The weight of their shared history still hung over them, but there was something else to hope. Or perhaps the beginning of hope. The meeting started, and Leo did his best to focus. The conversations were mostly about trade and resources, but there was one issue that seemed to take center stage: the safety of the galaxy. The various alien races were concerned about a growing threat from an unknown faction. They were divided on how to respond, some wanting to form alliances, others suggesting they go on the offensive. Leo knew that this was the moment to prove Earth's worth. He stood up, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze on him as he stepped to the front, cleared his throat, his heart pounding, and began to speak. "We understand your concerns," Leo started, his voice steady, "but we must not let fear guide us. We must act with reason and strength. Humanity has been through its own share of darkness, and we know what it's like to fight against something bigger than ourselves. We don't shy away from challenges. We face them head on." The room was silent as the delegates listened. Leo could feel the eyes of the council on him, some skeptical, others curious. He continued, "I know the history between our people is complicated. I know the past can't be erased. But what matters now is what we do moving forward. We have learned from our mistakes, and we are ready to prove ourselves. Earth is not the same place it once was, and we are ready to stand by you in the face of this threat." When Leo finished, he felt the weight of the room's silence. Some of the delegates exchanged looks, others nodded slowly. But Alira's gaze didn't leave him. She had been listening intently, her face unreadable. But there was something in her eyes that told him his words had made an impact. And a few long moments passed before the delegate from the Yitar race stood up. "We've heard your words, human," he said, his voice deep and steady. "But words alone are not enough. We need proof. Show us that you are worthy of trust. Show us that humanity has truly changed." Leo nodded, understanding the challenge. "We'll show you. We're ready to prove ourselves." After the meeting, Leo felt exhausted, but he knew this was only the beginning. He couldn't change everyone's mind in one day, but he had planted a seed. Lyra's eyes had softened just a little when he spoke. Maybe there was hope after. All later that evening, Leo found himself in the palace garden again. The day had been long, and he needed to clear his head. As he walked through the quiet space, he saw Lyra standing by the fountain, just as she had been before. She turned when she heard his footsteps, and once again, their eyes met. "I've done what I can," Leo said, his voice low. "I've made my case. Now it's up to them." Lyra nodded but said nothing for a moment. She looked up at the stars, as if searching for an answer in their quiet glow. Then she turned to face him. "You were right, Leo," she said softly. "Words alone are not enough. But you've shown them something. You've shown them that you're not like the others, that humanity can be trusted." Leo felt a rush of relief. "That's all I wanted. I wanted to show them that we've changed." Lyra studied him for a long moment. "You have," she said quietly. "But the real challenge lies ahead. We'll not forget the past easily, and neither will I." Leo nodded. "I don't expect you to forget. I will do everything I can to prove that humanity is worthy of trust, and that I'm worthy of standing here beside you." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked vulnerable. "I'm not the only one you need to convince, Leo, but perhaps you are starting to convince me." Leo's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected that. He had known that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but hearing those words from Lyra, seeing the slightest crack in her icy demeanor, gave him hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for peace between their people. A chance for something better. The night stretched on, and Leo and Lyra stood in silence, looking up at the stars. They both had a long road ahead of them, but for the first time they both felt that they weren't walking it alone.